All right, welcome to the deep dive, everybody. Today we're going to be tackling something that I think a lot of people are really curious about, and that's trying to understand what is going on with Gen Z politically.
Yeah, it's a big topic for sure.
I mean, you hear so much in the headlines, and frankly, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding.
Oh, I agree.
And so we wanted to really take a deep dive into this and try to figure out what's really going on. We found this fascinating piece called The Surprising Truth About Generation Z's Political Views.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
And we thought, this could be a really good way to shortcut all the noise and figure out what actually makes Gen Z tick politically.
For sure. I think that's a great plan.
So just to kind of like level set for everyone,
Yeah.
when we talk about Gen Z, we're talking about folks born roughly between the mid-90s and the early 2010s.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Which means, first and foremost, these are true digital natives.
Oh, absolutely. The first generation to really grow up with technology, like completely integrated into their lives.
I mean, they don't even know a world without the internet.
Right. And social media is just second nature to them.
And that has to have a huge impact on how they see the world, how they form their opinions. Right?
Definitely. It shapes how they access information, connect with each other, everything.
And we also have to remember, this is an incredibly diverse generation. I mean, just in terms of race, ethnicity, background, you name it.
Yeah, much more so than previous generations, and that brings a whole different mix of perspectives to the table.
And that's got to shape their political views too, right?
For sure. It makes for a much more dynamic and complex conversation.
Totally. And of course, we can't forget, this is a generation that's also come of age during some pretty major events. 9/11, the Great Recession, I mean, that's got to leave a mark.
Oh, absolutely. Those events have really shaped their outlook, particularly when it comes to things like institutions and economic security, for sure.
So there's a lot to unpack here, but our mission for this deep dive is to really get to the bottom of Gen Z's political views, their core values, how they engage, and what it all means for the future.
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? What does it all mean for the future?
Right. So let's jump into it. Where do we even begin with all of this? I mean, where do we start trying to make sense of this generation?
Well, I think a good starting point is to really look at what they care about most. And what we see again and again is this huge emphasis on social justice, on equality.
Right. And I feel like you can really see that play out in so many different ways.
Oh, yeah, for sure. When you look at their views on things like racial equality or gender equality, LGBTQ plus rights, it's clear that these issues are front and center for them.
It's not just lip service, right? It's like really deeply held.
It is.
Yeah.
And it's reflected in everything from who they support politically to the policies they advocate for.
Yeah, they're not just going to support any candidate or any policy. They really want to see real action on these issues, like addressing systemic inequalities.
Exactly. They're holding people accountable, which is really encouraging to see.
So social justice is definitely a cornerstone. But another thing that really jumps out right alongside that is climate action.
Oh, huge. Huge.
This isn't just a trendy thing for them. I mean, this feels really different.
It does, and it should. This is the generation that's going to be dealing with the consequences of climate change more than any other.
So for them, it's not a hypothetical thing, it's their reality.
Exactly. So sustainability, environmental responsibility, that's not optional. It's like a must-have.
And they're really pushing for change on so many fronts. I mean, renewable energy, reducing carbon emissions, all of that.
Yep. And they're not afraid to get politically active to make it happen. Like we've seen with movements like Fridays for Future.
They're not waiting for permission.
Nope, they're taking charge, and they're demanding action now.
Right now. And it's interesting how this focus on well-being extends beyond just the planet. They're also really focused on mental health, maybe more so than any generation before.
It's true. Gen Z is so much more open about mental health, and that's a good thing. They're not afraid to talk about it.
And that translates into action, right?
It does. They're pushing for better access to mental health care, more support systems.
And are looking for leaders who prioritize those things.
Absolutely. For them, it's all connected. You can't have a healthy society without addressing mental health.
Yeah. Now, we can't talk about Gen Z without talking about the economic realities they're facing. I mean, they've graduated into a world with rising student debt, a crazy job market. Like, how can that not impact their political views?
It's a huge factor, for sure. I mean, they're looking at things like the cost of living going up, wages not really keeping pace, and it's got to be scary.
So they're looking for solutions. I mean, they want to see policies that address these issues.
Absolutely. They want economic equality, fair wages, affordable education. They want a fair shot.
So we're seeing these core values, this emphasis on social justice, climate action, mental health, and economic opportunity really driving their worldview.
It's the foundation of their political beliefs, for sure.
Okay, so that brings us to how they actually engage with these issues. And, we can't ignore the element in the room here, which is social media.
Right. Social media has completely transformed how Gen Z engages with the world, especially politically.
I mean, platforms like Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, they're not just for fun anymore.
Their town square, their news source, their organizing platform, everything.
It's a far cry from how previous generations consumed information, right? Like, it's not just about watching the news on TV or reading the newspaper.
Right. Gen Z is getting their information from a million different sources online, and it's happening constantly.
And that means their political views are being shaped in a whole new way, right? I mean, think about the power of online movements, things like Black Lives Matter or Fridays for Future.
Yeah, huge. Social media was crucial in getting those movements off the ground and spreading their message globally.
The speed at which things can go viral is insane. It's like a local issue can become an international conversation overnight.
Exactly. And hashtags, they can be so powerful in unifying people around a cause.
Yeah, and it's not just about these big organized movements. I feel like individual influencers can have a massive impact now, too.
Oh, absolutely. They've become these trusted voices for Gen Z, and they can really mobilize people.
And it's interesting. It's like the way they talk about political issues, it's less formal, more conversational. It's more relatable for younger people.
For sure. It feels more authentic, less like a lecture from on high.
But the question is, does all this online activity translate into real-world political action? Like, are they actually voting?
That's the key question, right?
Right.
And the answer is yes, they are voting and increasing numbers.
Which is huge.
It is.
Yeah.
If you look at the 2020 U.S. presidential election, we saw a significant increase in voter turnout among 18 to 29-year-olds, like somewhere around 50%.
Yeah, I remember those numbers. That was a big jump.
It was. And it seems like a lot of this increased engagement is driven by those core issues we talked about: social justice, climate change, healthcare reform.
It's not just voting because it's what you're supposed to do.
Right. They're voting because they want to see real change on the issues they care about most.
It's values-based voting, right?
Exactly. And there's a survey by the Institute for Politics that found that something like 78% of young people said their values are what drive their vote.
Wow, that's a big majority.
It is. It shows how seriously they take those values.
Now, of course, not everyone in Gen Z is voting.
Right. And there are a few reasons for that.
Some of it is practical, right?
Yeah.
Like access to voting can be a real problem.
Yep. Things like voter ID laws or having limited polling places, those can make it harder for people to vote.
And then there's this sense of disillusionment with traditional politics, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, a lot of young people feel like the system isn't really working for them, that their vote doesn't really matter.
And let's be real, politics can be kind of a mess.
It can be.
Yeah.
And it can be really off-putting for young people who are idealistic and want to see real change.
But I think it's also important to note that Gen Z is engaging politically in other ways, right? Like through activism, online campaigns.
For sure. They're finding different avenues to make their voices heard, which is great.
And it's not just about voting for them, it's about being actively involved.
Yeah. And they're less tied to traditional party structures, which is really interesting.
It's less about blindly following a party and more about supporting the candidates and the issues that align with their values.
A much more independent approach to politics, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah, I think so too. Now, one thing that's really important to consider is where these values and perspectives are formed in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And, education has to play a huge role in that, especially for Gen Z.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they're the youngest generation actively participating in politics right now, so their education is crucial in shaping how they see the world.
And it seems like education is evolving too, right? There's more of a focus on talking about current events, even controversial topics, in the classroom.
Yeah, it's less about rote memorization and more about teaching critical thinking skills, encouraging students to form their own opinions.
Which is so important.
It is. It's about giving them the tools to analyze information, to engage in thoughtful debate.
And I think a lot of schools are also doing a better job of incorporating diverse viewpoints into the curriculum.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's not just about presenting one side of the story anymore.
Which helps promote understanding, tolerance, all the things we need to have a productive political dialogue.
Absolutely. And it's not just happening in the classroom either. We're seeing a lot of cool civic education initiatives, things like community service projects, internships, that give students a chance to engage with these issues in a hands-on way.
I love that. It's like taking what they're learning and applying it to the real world.
Exactly. And it gives them a sense of agency, like they can actually make a difference.
And I think that's really empowering for young people.
It is. It helps them build confidence, develop their skills, and really see the impact they can have.
So it's this whole ecosystem, right? It's the classroom learning, the peer-to-peer interactions, the school culture. All of it comes together to shape their political outlook.
It's all connected.
And it's laying the groundwork for how they engage with the political system, how they become activists, all of that.
Yeah. And speaking of activism, I think it's fair to say that Gen Z is really changing the game there.
I mean, they are a force to be reckoned with when it comes to activism, no question.
They're not just sitting on the sidelines, they're out there demanding change.
And they're using all the tools at their disposal.
Right.
Like social media is obviously a huge part of it.
Oh, it's essential. I mean, they're so good at using platforms like Twitter, Instagram, TikTok to organize, mobilize, get their message out there.
And they're not just talking about it, they're taking action. They're launching online campaigns, starting petitions.
They're masters of the hashtag, for sure.
And it's working. They're getting results. They're raising awareness. They're putting pressure on lawmakers. They're holding people accountable.
Yeah, and they're really smart about connecting the dots between different issues. They understand that these things aren't happening in isolation.
Right. That's that intersectionality we talked about before.
Exactly. Like for them, it's not just about climate change or racial justice. It's about how those things intersect and how we need to address them together.
And it's so refreshing to see because it's a much more holistic view of the world.
It is. And it's leading to some really creative and effective forms of activism.
I mean, Gen Z is bringing a whole new level of artistry and innovation to activism.
They're using music, art, storytelling, performance. It's not just about marching in the streets anymore.
I get that you have to grab people's attention, you know? You have to make it engaging, even entertaining.
Right. And they're really good at tapping into emotions, using their creativity to connect with people on a deeper level.
But as much as they're making progress, they're also facing some serious headwinds, right?
Oh, definitely. I mean, the political landscape is pretty challenging right now, especially for young people.
One of the biggest hurdles they face is the whole issue of misinformation.
Oh, that's huge. And it's not just about fake news. It's about the sheer volume of information out there, the bias, the spin. It's hard to know what to trust.
Especially when you're getting most of your news from social media.
Right. It's like a constant fire hose of information.
Yeah.
And it can be really overwhelming.
And then you've got political polarization, which makes it even harder to have productive conversations.
Yeah. Everything is so black and white, so us versus them. There's no room for nuance, for compromise.
It can be really intimidating for young people who are just starting to engage with politics.
It makes them hesitant to speak up, to share their views for fear of being attacked or shut down.
And then there's the whole generational stereotype thing.
Oh, yeah, the whole kids these days thing.
You know, being dismissed as naive or idealistic just because you're young.
It's so frustrating for them because their concerns are valid, their ideas are important.
So they're navigating all of these challenges, but the reality is they're not going anywhere, right?
You know, they're only going to become more influential as time goes on.
Which is why it's so important to understand them, to listen to them.
Yeah, because they're the future, whether we like it or not.
So what does all of this mean for the future of politics? I mean, how is Gen Z going to shape the political landscape as they become more and more of the electorate?
Well, I think we can expect to see some big changes. I mean, their values, their priorities, they're going to start to reshape political parties and platforms.
Like if parties want their votes, they're going to have to adapt.
Exactly. Because Gen Z cares about things like social justice, climate action, mental health, and they're not going to support candidates or parties that don't take those things seriously.
So we could see a shift towards more progressive policies.
It's definitely possible. Or we might see new parties or movements emerge that better reflect Gen Z's values.
Right. Like they're not as tied to the old ways of doing things.
They're not. They're willing to shake things up, to challenge the status quo.
And we can't forget about the role of technology, right? Social media is going to continue to be a huge force in politics.
Oh, absolutely. Campaigns are going to have to become even more digitally savvy to reach Gen Z voters.
And politicians are going to have to learn how to engage authentically online.
Because Gen Z can spot a fake a mile away.
They're looking for real conversations, real connections.
And they're demanding transparency and accountability from their leaders.
So it's going to be interesting to see how all of this plays out.
It's going to be a wild ride, that's for sure.
But one thing's for certain, Gen Z is going to have a huge impact on the future of politics.
There's no doubt about it.
So I think this deep dive into the surprising truth about Generation Z's political views has been super insightful. We've covered a lot of ground. We talked about how their core values really center around social justice, climate action, mental health, and economic opportunity.
Yeah, we did.
And we looked at how they're using social media in such a savvy way to engage politically, how their voter turnout is rising because they're motivated by their values, and how education is shaping their perspectives.
We also talk about how they're approaching activism in this really innovative and intersectional way.
And the challenges they face with misinformation and polarization.
And of course, the huge potential they have to completely reshape the political landscape.
I mean, this is a generation that's not afraid to challenge the status quo, to demand change.
They're not messing around.
So here's a final thought to leave you with.
Okay, I'm listening.
We talked about how Gen Z is so digitally fluent, how they crave authenticity. So how do you think institutions, and I'm not just talking about political parties, but also media, even workplaces, how do they need to adapt to really engage with this generation, to connect with them in a way that feels genuine, that resonates with their values? Because if we can figure that out, I think there's incredible potential to work together to create real, lasting change.
That's a really good question.
It's something to think about.
It is.
So thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive. I hope you found this conversation as fascinating as we did.
Me too. Thanks for having me.
All right, everybody, until next time, keep diving.
See you later.